Tinubu silenced critics after high-profile meetings with bishops, Koroma, and NBA president-elect. It was a day that reshaped the tone of political conversation in Abuja, as President Bola Ahmed Tinubu moved through a tightly choreographed sequence of engagements that, taken together, did more to quiet his critics than any single policy announcement could. Within the space of a few hours at the State House, the president received the leadership of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria, welcomed former Sierra Leone President Ernest by Koroma, and hosted the president-elect of the Nigerian Bar Association, Oyinkansola Badejo-Okusanya. Each meeting on its own might have passed as routine diplomatic courtesy. Together, they formed a picture that aides in the presidency were quick to amplify, a leader engaging the church, the region, and the law all in a single sweep. The meeting with the Catholic bishops carried the heaviest symbolic weight. Led by the Archbishop of Kaduna, Most Reverend Matthew Ndagoso, a delegation of 19 CBCN leaders sat with the president to air concerns that have simmered for months. Insecurity in the country's north and middle belt, the state of tertiary education, the fragile gains of the country's democratic institutions, the conduct of elections, and the persistence of poverty across communities that had hoped reform would arrive faster. Ndagoso used the occasion to press the president on the long-standing question of mission schools, urging that they be returned to church control, and called for fairness in the allocation of worship spaces nationwide, regardless of denomination or region. Tinubu did not treat the appeal as ceremonial. He told the bishops that the authority to decide on the return of mission schools rests constitutionally with state governors, not with the federal government, and pointed to his own record on the matter, recalling that he had returned mission schools to their original owners during his tenure as governor of Lagos. It was an answer that managed to sound both sympathetic and boxed in, an acknowledgement of the church's grievance paired with a reminder of where the actual decision-making power sits. On security, the president struck a more assertive note, telling the clergymen that the ongoing restructuring of the country's security architecture would deliver results against terrorism, banditry, and kidnapping. He framed the current lull in disruptive protests and strikes across university campuses as, in his words, an answered prayer, a phrase that played well with a room of clergy but will inevitably be tested against how long the calm holds. The president also used the meeting to defend the Independent Electoral Commission, describing it as neutral and insisting that electoral opportunities remain equal for all contestants. He pushed back directly at those who accuse INEC of bias, suggesting that such complaints often reflect political anxiety rather than hard evidence, a line clearly aimed at opposition figures who have kept up a steady drumbeat of criticism over the condition.
Barely had the bishops departed than the president turned to a very different kind of guest. Ernest by Koroma, the former president of Sierra Leone, was received at the State House in what the presidency's own statement described simply as a courtesy visit. Koroma's presence in Abuja is itself the product of an extraordinary diplomatic arc. He had spent more than 2 years in political exile in Nigeria, hosted under Tinubu's watch, after treason charges were brought against him in connection with the failed coup attempt of November 2023 in Freetown. Those charges have since been discontinued by Sierra Leone's parliament, and Koroma has been shuttling between Abuja and Freetown as the process of his rehabilitation plays out, including an appearance at the ECOWAS Media Summit in Sierra Leone earlier this month as a guest of President Julius Maada Bio. That Koroma chose to pass through the State House again this week, even as speculation swirls in Freetown over a possible presidential pardon, added a layer of regional statesmanship to Tinubu's day. It reinforced a narrative the presidency has leaned into for months, that Nigeria, under Tinubu, positions itself as a stabilizing hand in West African politics, willing to extend hospitality and quiet diplomatic cover to a fellow former head of state navigating a fraught return home. Nothing about the meeting was announced with fanfare. There was no extended readout nor press conference. But the optics did the work on their own. A sitting president, flanked by the machinery of state, receiving a former president whose fate had been entangled with Nigeria's own diplomatic standing in the sub-region. The final engagement of the day carried a different texture altogether, less about geopolitics, more about the domestic institutions that shape everyday Nigerian life. Oyinkansola Badejo-Okusanya, who made history last month as the first woman elected president of the Nigerian Bar Association, led a delegation of senior lawyers to the presidential villa.
He emerged to tell reporters that the president had congratulated her on her victory and that their conversation centered on the practical challenges of electronic voting and the deployment of technology in the NDA's own internal elections, a subject that resonates well beyond the legal profession, given how contested the question of electronic transmission of results has been in Nigeria's own national politics. Badejo-Okusanya, whose inauguration is not due until the end of August, used the moment to signal the tone she intends to set for her tenure. She told journalists she had already begun consultations with members and stakeholders across the association, with an eye towards healing divisions that lingered after a bruising election season within the bar itself. She promised reconciliation, inclusiveness, and institutional stability, and said her administration would do everything necessary to strengthen the unity of a body that has in recent years been anything but unified. Her visit did not end at the villa. She and a team of female lawyers, including the Dean of the Faculty of Law at Caleb University and the President of the International Federation of Women Lawyers, went on to call on First Lady Oluremi Tinubu, who told the delegation that women advancing together was essential to breaking barriers in leadership, and urged the incoming NBA president to set the standard for others coming behind her. Taken in isolation, none of these three meetings would have generated much heat. Courtesy visits from religious leaders, regional statesmen, and professional bodies are a routine feature of any presidency, but strung together on a single day and amplified through State House channels eager to project an image of a president actively listening, actively engaging, and actively in command of both domestic and regional affairs, the effect was cumulative. Critics who have spent recent weeks hammering the administration over insecurity, economic strain, and allegations swelling around unrelated matters in government found the news cycle, at least for a day, dominated by images of bishops, a former African head of state, and the country's newest and first female bar leader, all smiling for the cameras inside the villa. Whether the good wind survives contact with the harder questions still facing the administration is another matter entirely. The bishop's concerns about mission schools and worship equity remain unresolved, parked for now with state governors. The security restructuring Tinubu described to the CBCN delegation has yet to be tested against the next major security incident, and Badejo-Okusanya's promises of reconciliation within the NBA will only be judged once she is sworn in and the association's fractures are put to the test under her leadership. For now, though, the president's critics have been handed little fresh ammunition, and the presidency will count that on its own as a quiet win.